Hello, this is a short tutorial to explain the working principles of linear discriminant analysis. Linear discriminant analysis is very closely related to principal component analysis. So in principal component analysis, we achieve dimensional reduction by trying to find some kind of new rotations of the original variable space in such a way that we maximize variation along the new axis. All right, so the total variation is partitioned along each of the new principal components, and then each of them will contain the maximum amount of variation along that direction. And this is done through eigendecomposition of the global covariance matrix. Since this is an unsupervised method, that means the class labels are not used. On the other hand, LDA is a supervised method, which means it uses class information. It also tries to find some kind of a rotation of the original space, but the criterion for optimality is different from PCA. PCA tries to find rotation that maximizes variation along a particular axis, whereas LDA tries to find rotation that maximizes class separation. Okay, using information contained in the product of two matrices, right, which we will look at later. It turns out that this product of these two matrices is actually a multivariate analog of sum square between over sum square within, which is used in ANOVA. So once this matrix has been found, the eigenvectors in LDA are found by the usual method of performing eigendecomposition on this particular matrix, the SW inverse multiplied by SB. Okay, so this is an example of how PCA and LDA finds the rotation axis. All right, so in this example, we have we've got four class labels. All right, and PCA produces the rotation that you see on the scatter plot on the top right, whereas LDA produces the ordination in the scatter plot that you see on the bottom left. All right, you can see that actually the rotation produced by LDA is actually better than the one produced by PCA. And the axis of rotation are given in the scatter plot on the bottom right corner, which I'll come to that later. Right. So those are the axes of rotations. Okay, to see how LDA does the rotation. So basically, if you look at the LDA, the axis of rotation is given by the dashed line. So if you make the projections of the rate data points onto the this dashed line, so you got a projection here. You make the projection of the green dots until here. So you will find that you can have also a projection of the black points here, right? So that's how you get this particular rotation, right? So you can see that on the LD one, they are like, the projection is here. They are stacked on top of each other. And then on the LD2, all right, so LD2, presumably after you have this rotation, then there's what remains is that there is a perpendicular axis, right, where there's only the projection is made onto here. Okay. All right. So for PCA, you notice that the most of along this axis, so the amount of variation is actually largest, right? So you can see that the variance that's running along this line is much larger than the variance that's running in this direction. You can also see that in the previous plot, right? So you can see that if you orient the data along this direction, so you capture the variation along this direction, right? That's where most of the variation resides. Then there's only a little bit of variation left on this direction. Okay, that's why you see different kinds of rotations because PCA and LDA, they essentially use the information in the data differently, right? Okay, so now we can go to some technicalities. So the math is actually not very complicated. You have a data matrix which you can represent using for the general observation using the notation ijk, xijk, where I indexes sample, j indexes variable, and k indexes the class label. And for each class, you can find its mean vector, yeah, which is basically you take the average of all the samples within a particular class for each of the variables, all right? So you can produce the mean vectors for class label 1, class label 2, class label 3, for example. And then you can have the grand mean vector, yeah, which is basically you remove all the information about the classes, and then you simply average across all the samples. That will also produce, you can get the mean for all the column variables in such a way. So actually, to be precise, this should be actually a transpose. Okay. And if you don't have the transpose, the vector is actually, instead of 1 times 4 here, it will be 4 times 1. So this is just a minor thing. Okay, so the quantity that's computed, the matrix S subscript K, is basically some kind of an analog of the sum square within, okay, for a particular class label. So basically what happens is that you have the following. So you basically have, for a particular class label, so you have a vector, the data vector for sample 1, right? So you take that, okay? So you take that, and so this vector is actually 1 times 4. So over here, this is transpose, right? The transpose version. You take that and you subtract the mean vector, okay, for the cave group, and then you multiply. You basically square the vector. In linear algebra, when two vectors are squared, it's basically the product of the vector and its transpose. Right? This is the multivariate analog of squaring, okay, for univariate case. So basically, you basically square the vector, and then you add for all the. So you do that for one vector, and then you do the second one and third one, and so on, right? So you do. For each of the vectors within a particular class, right? And then you add them together. Okay, this will produce a matrix that is of dimension p times p, right? And then the SW is basically your analog of the sum square within. So which basically is you just add up all the SKs from 1 to the C, which is the number of class labels. Then your matrix SB, the between class label scatter matrix, is also is a multivariate analog of your sum square between in ANOVA, whereby you basically take the mean vector and you subtract the grand mean vector, yeah, and then you square that vector by multiplying with its transpose, and then you weight it with the sample size of that particular class. Okay, so this is analogous to the SSB in ANOVA, and then basically after that you add up everything, right? Sum. Okay, so now you have got SW and SB. So we find the quantity S. Okay, you find this quantity, right? You take the inverse of SW multiplied by SB. This is a multivariate analog of SSB divided by SSW, and it is of dimension P times P. So then it's a square matrix, right? And from this square matrix, we perform eigen decomposition to obtain the eigenvectors and the eigenvalues and the eigenvectors. Okay, and unlike PCA, where all the number of eigenvectors is the same as the number of variables, the eigenvectors that are kept in LDA is equal to the following. It's the minimum of P or C minus 1, which means whichever one is smaller, all right? The number of variables, if the number of variables is smaller than the number of class labels minus 1, then you will take P. Otherwise, if the number of class labels minus 1 is smaller than the number of variables, we will take C minus 1, all right? So just now in the previous example, you see that there are two. Okay, so there are actually two LD axes, and that's because the data only has 2 dimensions. So the minimum of so we basically just have a minimum of 2, and C is 4 minus 1. So the minimum is 2, right? That's why we have 2 axes. All right, and therefore, if in this case, so we will, after eigen decomposition, we only take the first 2. In this case, with the first 2, there might be some other eigenvectors in general, but depending on this condition, so we will remove this. We will not consider these eigenvalues, and the amount of variation that's explained by the LD1, LD2, and so on will be basically you just sum until like so you will sum the eigenvalues until this part here, which is basically a minimum of P C minus 1. Okay, so the LD1 and LD2 also has similar interpretation like your principal component axis, in the sense that they explain a certain amount of variation in the data. Okay, so I think that is all for a very quick introduction to LDA. Thank you for listening.